or visit us online at studentloanhelp.org.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Secrets of Success. Today we're speaking with Howard Yu, author of Leap. Howard, we were talking about the principles that can help companies predict and prosper when it's time to leap. We talked about, number one, understanding the firm's foundational knowledge and trajectory. Number two is acquire and cultivate new knowledge and disciplines. Now, don't firms give you a hard time when you say that to them because saying, well, maybe I'm a specialist in food products. Do they want to cultivate and bring in new knowledge, or are they willing to do this?
Yeah, this is where the tendency of busy executive that it's very hard for them to balance preparing the organization for the future versus delivering today's short-term earning. So from food company to automotive to retailing, they're really busy, and it's not like they have a lot of time standing idle. But then what we've seen is, in order for a company to really prosper over the long run, you constantly need to get your organization to be ready to leap to the new frontier of knowledge. And in many ways, in the first part of our conversation, we kind of explore, and there are a couple of themes that are really important, such as connectivity, the rise of smart machine, and the more importance of managerial creativity. And if you're thinking for a food company, for example, if you only produce food, it's going to be a commoditized type of competition. But if you begin to thinking about a holistic customer experience, zooming in or zeroing in, the kind of value proposition or the real-life problem your target consumer are facing, and deliver a compelling experience or customer journey by leveraging the kind of seismic shift we earlier talked about, then, a copycat would have a harder time to catch you up. Because copying a singular or discrete features is very, very easy. Copying holistic experience become much more difficult. And in today's world, it's all about data analytics. No matter what kind of industry you're in, you have to understand the consumer journey through much more holistic way of looking at data analytics. So I would argue no matter what kind of industry you're in, leaping to the new knowledge discipline is key to success. And right now, one of the most salient themes is large data analytics.
Now, Howard, the next principle is leverage seismic shifts. Now,
Correct.
Is that someone, though, I'm thinking most companies, your head person is an older person by and large. They've been around. Do they have to get in kind of a creative department to do this, to see where these shifts are coming so that they know what's on the other side of the mountain?
Yeah, this is the challenge for large established company because it's almost like there is a generation gap where the board members together with the top management team may have been in the business for the last 20, 30 years. And we are human, we come with certain biases and mental model. But successful leader, I observe, is constantly challenge their own existing paradigm. They are not so much afraid of the shift of the environment, and they are immensely curious. I find one key themes jump out from my research is successful executive, they must be curious about the world changing around us. And so typically what happens is, in order for the top team to really come to grip about the seismic shift around them, it's not so much just asking for a consulting firm to deliver a report, read through some of these, and they're done with it. They need to go out and see. Seeing is believing. For example, I've seen a German automotive company decided to go into China, not that they have a big business out there, but they want to understand how does China, for example, conceptualize future transport, and then selectively pick certain elements to incorporate back to their strategic planning processes. So seeing is believing, having this tremendous amount of curiosity are the prerequisite for senior executive to be able to leverage the seismic shift around them in order to reinvent themselves in the right way.
Now, Howard, one of the things I made notes on when I was going through your book on the fourth principle, experiment to gain evidence.
Right.
You say the biggest risk is collective inaction. And I would definitely be guilty of that because someone's running around, as you said, we have to keep the stock prices up day to day. We have to keep production going. Some machine went down. There's always a new problem coming up. And if someone says to me, we're looking at the future, I'd say, well, let's look at today first. How do you get around that? Because that does seem like a big problem to me. And like I say, I would be the most guilty one.
I think everyone is guilty of that at one point or another. And in many ways, I think large established companies find it so hard to put in the commitment as a team or having a unified agenda to leap forward is because they lack the evidence. Lacking the evidence in the sense that it's very, very easy for a company to measure today's success. You have existing KPI, measuring profitability. You have a way of doing pricing projection, market size projection. But when you're talking about leaping to a new knowledge discipline, oftentimes those strategic initiatives would find it very, very hard to render into traditional financial analysis. And so here is where experimentation becomes key, because only by putting yourself in the marketplace through could be a minimum viable product or through in-depth customer observation, then you would have alternative type of evidence. These becomes leading indicator. I mean, profitability in many ways are lagging indicator. It's a consequence of good choices. Now, when you leap forward, leveraging on a new knowledge discipline, oftentimes profitability come last. It's during the investment mode. Here is when an organization need to redefine KPI, redefine the key performance indicator so that they can measure the right stuff. Only by doing so, then over time, the organization would have more and more momentum. And when we observe transformation happen, is the accumulation of enough data to push the organizational paradigm to shift, and then most or the majority of the manager would come on board.
Howard, before we get to the fifth principle, I want to mention to our audience once again, Howard's book is LEAP, one simple four-letter word, L-E-A-P. It's by our guest, Howard, U-Y-U. And if you're one of those companies that's out there listening to this, be advised that Howard is telling this to the major companies in the world, to the major universities in the world. And if you're not following his advice, it seems like you might be at the end of the line. So it might be good to check him out, find out what he's talking about, and read a little more about Howard Yu. And Howard's going to tell us where we can get the book, Leap, and the website.
So for those who like to shop it online, you could go to Amazon.com. For those who prefer a conventional bookstore, could go to Barnes & Nobles. And you could check out for more information in my website. It's howardyu.org. So that's HOWARDYU.org. And there will be additional resources you can download as you read through the book.
And if you want to keep up with the competition and actually be in front of it, you better read what Howard's writing. Now, Howard, the fifth principle, I like this. It says, dive deep into execution. And you mentioned two very quick sayings, but carries a lot of weight. Awareness is not execution, and thinking does not equate with doing. So can you tell us about that, dive deep into execution?
Yeah. So this is where a certain final task that a CEO can never delegate. And what I have observed, the final barrier to leap is usually happen at a time when the organization has already done a lot of experimentation. But then in order to move forward, it does require certain switch in terms of resource allocation. Let me give you a very, very quick example. Novartis is the third largest pharmaceutical firm in the world, and they are based in Switzerland. And they specialize in different type of cancer treatment. Now, historically, Novartis is very, very strong in the discipline of microbiology. In fact, this is how antibiotics is being invented. For the longest time, that's the knowledge discipline. Now, of course, we know genomics and DNA and genetics are today's most important knowledge discipline. So back then, Novartis is at the edge of about to leap to the new knowledge discipline. They invented a drug is treating cancer, a rare form of cancer, in fact, CML, leukemia. And so with all the data and experimentation going on, it's promising, except for one thing. To treat rare form of cancer, the market size is relatively small. And so within the executive team, there was a huge debate and fear that we should stop that project and move the resources back to the mainstream disease class like breast cancer or prostate and so on. Those are larger categories. But the CEO, Daniel Vasella, at the time thought, well, this is not just about capturing additional revenue, because leaping into new knowledge discipline would have this fundamental shift of the way we're thinking about cancer treatment, targeted drugs, and so on. So he said to his team, money doesn't matter. Let's move ahead. And it is precisely sometimes of this statement, money doesn't matter, at the risk of cannibalize your existing sales, that only a CEO can do it. And it's almost the almost cliche saying now that Steve Jobs would say, if you don't cannibalize yourself, someone else would. So in that last part of the book, I essentially identified this critical circumstance of specific type of CEO intervention has to happen in order to remove the final barriers to change. It usually comes last. The CEO doesn't have all the data in the beginning, but once the evidence becomes so clear, there is still the final removal of the historical past. Only the CEO could do it.
It must take a lot of courage for that CEO, though, to say, let money be no barrier, just do what we feel we have to do to move ahead and to keep the company where we wanted. A lot of courage and a lot of sleepless nights.
It does, right? But what's interesting, it turns out this kind of mentality is not just Jeff Bezos and Amazon, it's not just Netflix, it's not just Google or Facebook. In fact, we've seen it everywhere, from 200 years old kind of pharmaceutical firm all the way to Procter & Gamble, to today's world. Every company who can achieve long-term success, they do need to make those leap. And so it's also good news for companies who are of older generation, because in today's world, everyone is worried about disruption. It's almost this narrative that all old companies would die. And what I observe is not the case, in fact. When companies are able to orchestrate leap from one knowledge discipline to the next, it's very doable. And second is, when older companies are able to leap, in fact, they have much more advantage than competing with an individual startup. So ultimately, it is as you said, is a book of hope, and it's also a manifesto to compete into the future.
I want to thank you for wrapping up with those good words that gives us hope for the future. I want to remind our audience, our guest has been Howard Yu, YU. His book is Leap. And very quickly, Howard, if you tell us the website where we can find out more information.
Yeah, so it's sale on Amazon as well as Barnes & Nobles. And if you want to check out for more information, go to howardyu.org. So that's Howard Yu, one word, .org.
Thanks so much for being with us. We'd like to remind our audience that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.